Hello, and I am so delighted to welcome Patrick Olson and Daryl Green. Patrick is the proprietor of Patrick Olson Rare Books, and Daryl is the head of special collections at the University of Edinburgh. Both of these men are what I like to call serious book people. I have known each of them for a number of years, and they have significantly contributed to the field. Their careers have a number of similarities, and they worked together for a year in, of all places, the middle of Illinois. I am excited to see how this conversation with the two of them will develop. Welcome, Patrick and Daryl.
Thank you, Catherine.
Hey. Hi, Catherine.
Hi. First, I want to ask both of you to talk about your backgrounds before you went to library school at the University of Illinois, which is the alma mater for all three of us. Daryl, you received an MA at the University of York in medieval studies, and Patrick, you were already working in the trade back then, if I am correct. So if you guys want to talk about that, we'll start this little discussion.
You go first, Pat. I want to hear your story.
I was going to say, we're both from the Midwest. We could do the you go first thing for a while.
No, you go first.
All right. So I went to college undergrad in Chicago, and I think it was I was an English major. Writing, I actually meant to be a high school English teacher, but I was enrolled in the College of Liberal Arts and not the College of Education, and I was too lazy to change. So I'll just do the English major thing. I thought, well, writing seems like a precarious living, but somehow old books seemed less precarious. And so I had always kind of had an interest in old books. And I knew there was a book dealer in the South Loop of Chicago. So I went down there one day, I think this was the fall of 2003, asked for a job. He gave me one on the spot, and maybe that should have been some kind of red flag, I don't know. But in any case, yeah, I worked there for 4 years, the last 2 years of college, a year after college, and then for a year while I was at Illinois. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the brief. I would actually, when I was at Illinois, I would, train back to Chicago like every other weekend, crash with some friends, sometimes sleep on the floor of the shop, and keep doing the book thing there. So
That's pretty serious.
yeah, that's the short history.
Wow. Okay. What about you, Daryl?
Let's see. So I did my undergraduate at Kent State, and then my supervisor said, before graduate mode, go check out a master's and see how you feel about that. So the option of doing like 2 years in the States master's, or I could go to the UK and do it in 1 year. It costs about the same. So I chose, why the hell not? I'll go to the UK. Ended up at the University of York. And during my time there, it was one of the only times that I got to be a full-time student for a while, which was fun. So I worked through all my undergraduate. But towards the end of things, I was feeling a little bit tight on money, and a job came up at the Minster Library. So that's the Library of York Minster, which is a Minster cathedral, and one of the largest cathedral collections. And it was a part-time job, kind of front desk. But as I started to explore the collections, which are kind of a combination of modern and historic, the librarian there got me more and more interested in rare book work. So I worked there part-time through my dissertation write-up, and then ended up transitioning to full-time work after my master's was finished. And I stayed on a work visa for 1.5 years after my master's and just worked for the Minster Library, which is glorious. It's where I learned rare book cataloging. It's where I worked a lot with the archive and manuscript collection, and kind of got the feel that, I could do something that was, had 1 foot in academia and 1 foot in the kind of practical real world. But, at 5 o'clock, you could clock out and go home and do your own thing, which maybe isn't the case anymore, but that was kind of the attraction of the job. So yeah, I worked there for 1.5 years, and worked with the historic collections for the most part in the upper library, and decided that, this is a career path that I might try out. And I looked at library schools in the UK, but actually the library schools in the States offered more in terms of, especially working with historic collections. And so that's why I ended up coming to Illinois, to do the master's, and looked for some work opportunity, and found a rare book cataloging job in the Rare Book and Manuscript Library at UIC.
Oh my
And that's
God,
where I met Pat.
I didn't know this. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Wow. Thank you.
What about you, Catherine? I want to hear how you came to Illinois. I'm putting the interviewer on the spot. How did you come to Illinois?
How did I come to Illinois? Actually, I started out as a music librarian. So
Right.
I had wanted to be a music librarian ever since college. When I was at Smith College, and I worked in the music library there. So I wanted to be a music librarian for, I don't know, 7 years. My father kept talking me out of it. I was basically in publishing, and then I was working sort of in a publishing capacity in Chicago at the Sadie Records Chicago Classical Recording Foundation, which is run by Ruth Bader Ginsburg's son. So my boss was RBG's son. And
That's cool.
yeah, yeah. So fun connection there. But yeah, so I have this, I have a very, you can see I've got a lot of CDs back here, and a bunch of other places. So they're all classical CDs. So yeah, so basically I decided it was time to finally go to library school, and I wanted to be a music librarian. So I just went down to the University of Illinois, and I was connected with Don Crummell, and Don Crummell is somebody who connects all three of us. And
Yeah,
that's how I got into rare books. So I did rare books and music librarianship, and I was a music librarian for like a year before I switched to rare books librarianship. So, but yeah, so that leads me to my next question, which is, what our experience was like at the University of Illinois, and what we did at there. So at the time we were there, it was the University of Illinois Graduate School of Library and Information Science. It has now renamed to the School of Information Science, or SIS. So what, you guys both cataloged there, right, in the Rare Books and Manuscripts Library, and you did that at the same time, I guess. So
yeah,
you guys were there after me, right after me. So
Pat, I couldn't quite remember. Pat, you were there already running the was it at that time it was Mellon funded, right?
Yeah, it was Mellon funded, and I guess I wonder how far back I should go. So I had been cataloging there as an hourly cataloger for 2 years, and because I left the bookstore in Chicago. Speaking of financial precarity, to make a very long story short, I had no choice. I was able to land a spot with the rare book cataloging team in Illinois, so I moved back to Champaign-Urbana. And I worked there for almost 2 years before I was promoted to manager of the cataloging project. And I only did that for 4 months before I made my next move. But during that time, I know Daryl applied, and you were the one cataloger I hired during my very brief tenure as manager of the project. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Well, thank you.
And I remember, a number of things struck out about you, but one was you were coming from York Minster, and I had just finished a 6-week cataloging project at DePaul University in Chicago, cataloging their rare books. And one of them was one of the Caxtons that the Minster sold to ASW Rosenbach to fund their roof repairs.
That's crazy. I remember that story was still told while I was working in the Minster. It's like, we used to have these Caxtons and we sold them off so that oh, wow. That's crazy. Okay.
Catalog one. It was great. Thank you.
That's cool. Crazy. And so you ran that project for 4 months, and then did Linda take over afterwards? This is Linda Beal.
I think Linda did take over until on sort of a temporary basis until they could find someone more permanently for that position. I think.
Right. Yeah.
Well, she just left I guess it's the RBML. She just retired, like in the last 6 or 9 months or something like that.
Yeah. So I came to Illinois. I'm trying to do the math. I came to Illinois in 2009. Does that sound right? Yeah, 2009. And I was doing the graduate program full time and working at RBML part time. And I remember coming in, I was hoping to get a graduate studentship in the RBML, and that didn't pan out. And so I wrote a letter to Valerie. I was like, look, I'm coming from this background. Is there anything going? And that's when she put me in touch with Pat. And I remember starting work, and I was working with Pat and Linda and Adam Dosky, who's now back at Illinois, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he is. Yes.
And a few other people, just kind of landing this place where there's a whole bunch of, you know, super fantastic and nerdy bibliophiles and bibliographers. And it was great because the library school, there was a lot of classes that were pretty easy to coast through. And there, I mean, there was a couple that really were great. I mean, Bonnie Mac's History of the Book was really good.
Oh, I bet.
Alistair Black's History of Libraries was fantastic. And my best course, aside from working with Don, was Fred Schlipp's. Fred Schlipp, who ran a bunch of public libraries up in Chicago for a long time. He took us up to, this was a course that was about how to run a library, which was like all the practical stuff that you would never get in any other course, like, you know, how to read blueprints so you could figure out where your toilet is clogged and that kind of stuff. He was great. And then Don, which is somebody who links the three of us, yeah. So Don kind of took me under his wing, and I wanted to finish out as quick as I could because I didn't want to be in grad school for 2 years. Paying is, you know, but also a job came up in St. Andrews. And so Don organized some independent studies with me that kind of fulfilled the rest of my credit hours for guest lists. And I spent a lot of time with Don in my last 3 months in Illinois. So it was kind of this halcyon early summer of working quite a few hours by the end of it at RBML and spending time at Don's house talking about bibliographies. It was great.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. This is incredible.
It was super.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and another, a lot of those people came, who you mentioned, like Bonnie Mac, and also Valerie Hotchkiss. They came a little. Bonnie came after I was there. Valerie Hotchkiss actually started right when I was leaving.
Right.
Actually offered me a job cataloging, which I really should have taken instead of, because I had this whole journey of the public library that was a little difficult for me.
Right.
But Valerie also connects us in a way because she was the head of the Bridwell Library about 7 years before. I mean, that was where she was before she went to Illinois, and then I worked at the Bridwell. And so she and I have had a lot of conversations about, you know, having been at the Bridwell, and she's extraordinary. I mean, it must have been amazing working for her. So, but yeah, so there's that connection. And then
Valerie is a great boss. I mean, Pat, I don't know what you thought, but Valerie was great because she's the kind of person that would like go out and like wave a magic wand and raise a ton of money and then let you just go like into like bibliophile heaven and just do, you know, run things.
Yeah, she was a fierce advocate for the Rare Book Library, and yeah, her ability to raise money to fund whatever project was phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, she's a hardcore. She's very good at raising money, and she's also she's a serious book person, and she's a serious scholar. And I'm not going to say what she brought the amount of. I'm having my brain clot again, my COVID clot. But the endowment at the Bridwell, what she brought it to, but it was significant, I hope remains so. But she's. And then also, I just want to say for any viewers who don't know who Don Crummell is, he is a very important bibliographer, both music bibliographer and rare books person. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit more about how he's known as a rare books bibliographer, because I know him especially as a music bibliographer. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least at Illinois, I mean, his reputation as the great book person there was, you know, unimpeachable, and certainly he had the experience to back it up. And his bibliography course was, I think, far and away, at least, you know, the years I was in Champaign-Urbana, was the favorite course of anybody who went there to study, you know, rare books. and he knows everything, not just about bibliography, but about the field and who in the field is doing what. The man has a phenomenal capacity for sort of absorbing just the news and the happenings in the rare book world. He always knows what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, he was, and still remains a kind of fount of gossip in the rare book world. He worked. I mean, he worked Library of Congress for a long time, and then Newberry, and then came down to Urbana-Champaign. And yeah, same for me as well. I mean, his bibliography course is great. I mean, to find somebody who can teach budding librarians in a kind of digital world a course about books, you've got to have the right kind of personality. And Don was able to deliver that course, fresh year after year after year. Easy. I mean, you talk about great book people. Don is kind of ultimate person. Absolutely.
It's worth his handle on the gossip and what's happening in the rare book world. I mean, that's part and parcel with his generosity. He's always willing to talk to people, regardless of whether you're a veteran or a neophyte. And he loves to connect people with common interests. And yeah, he deserves a lot of credit for certainly what I've done in my own life.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's an extraordinary human. So yes, and he's somebody who survived a terrible, I'll just say for people who are watching, he survived a terrible bicycle accident at some point in the 90s, I think. Like he almost didn't live. And he completely rehabilitated from that, just from riding his bike around in Urbana, Illinois. And now he just turned 91, something like that, born in 1929. So yeah, he's still trucking. So
yep.
And posting occasionally on Ex Libris. So okay, well, I'll move along to our next phases in life.
Can we? Sorry, I just want to bring up something real quick.
Of course.
I'm trying to reflect on the cataloging jobs that we had at RBMI.
Oh yes, please. I'm sorry.
And I was trying to recount to myself earlier today. I can't remember what it was when I first came, what you guys were already working on, but I definitely remember the sequence of like Hollywood television 1950s scripts, and then some Arctic stuff, and then Incunabula.
Yeah.
I think I ended out RBML on the kind of start of the Incunabula project, but the Hollywood TV scripts, that was an education for me. That was crazy.
Yeah, that was the last. So when I started, we were cataloging the general backlog of, I mean, literally tens of thousands of general early printed books that Illinois had bought, during those years right after World War II, when the market was just flooded with early books. And they had bought and had not gotten around to cataloging everything. So that was sort of I think the genesis of the project was to handle this massive backlog. And so when you started, Daryl, I think we were just wrapping up that sort of catch-all backlog, and transitioning to all of these film and television scripts. And I was the manager at that point. I knew nothing about how to catalog. I didn't know how to catalog something that was 20th century. Like if it's 100, yeah, I can do that. But if it's from 1965, it terrified me. But yeah, so I learned a lot just trying to suss out the cataloging rules and how we were going to approach that. So I'm sure you know far more about how to actually catalog that stuff than I do at this point.
I still use some of those principles because especially in conversations with archivists, so because a lot of that stuff would fall within the archives. But like when we were acquiring modern photo books at St. Andrews, I still applied some of that kind of, the way that you set up the cataloging rules at Illinois was, treat the script as if it was a 16th century book, right? There's certain rules we need to follow for manuscript or non-published material, but still we're going to describe it to the nth possibility. Whether or not you agree with it or not. And I use those same principles when if you're developing a special collection, you might as well take the time to describe it properly and using the special rules that we've applied for ourselves. So I've still used some of those rules for 20th and 21st century collections as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then Incunabula, I mean, to kind of finish out the job, or at least for me, to finish out the job on Illinois' collection of Incunabula, which is huge. I mean,
Yeah.
they've got over 1,000 Incunabula.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great.
Well, I think, yeah. What were you going to say, Pat?
I said that was a fantastic collection to work with, and it was sort of my first institutional collection that I did work with, and looking back on it, like I feel like I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have. I was very fortunate to get to work with it. So, in any case,
I think it's very interesting too. I mean, especially you guys, because like you had this foundational experience as working very closely with these materials and working with these cataloging principles, and how that impacted all of these varied positions that you've held since then. I mean, really, I think that's significant, because
there's definitely a culture in Illinois of like, I mean, because DCRMB, so descriptive catalog rule. Oh God.
Cataloging of rare books, rare books and manuscripts.
Rare materials, parentheses, books, brackets.
Right.
So I mean, that was published and Pat and Illinois in general was very much, we're going to follow these rules to the nth degree, and same thing with RMM. And that was a lot of fun because you had this kind of rule book. So anybody that's used to like playing Dungeons and Dragons or something, you've got this rule book that you're going to stick to, but then you've got to kind of morph and adapt and change things depending on what you're playing with. And absolutely, that was a foundational experience.
Yeah. Well, and also, one thing that I've just kind of noticed about the rare books librarianship field in particular is that there's sort of this, brass ring that a lot of people aspire to. So many people very specifically want to be a curator. And actually that's a paper that I'm interested in writing at some point, is like the history of the title of curator, because curator didn't used to be such an important title. It actually used to be librarian. There's this whole history behind that. But regardless, that's something that so many people aspire to. And sometimes I don't always feel like catalogers are nearly as appreciated as they should be. And that may not necessarily even just be in rare books librarianship. It may be in other aspects of librarianship as well. But catalogers are vitally important. And this is a department that very frequently gets cut, that positions get cut from. And in America, of course, these are very frequently, just grant-funded positions and whatever. And so, you guys are, to me, and I would argue to many other people just who work with rare books, we all admire you greatly, and you really know your stuff. And I think it's important and to acknowledge that here's your base, it's in cataloging. So anyway, yeah. All right, well, anyway, so moving along, Daryl, of course, you as you mentioned, you went on to the University of St. Andrews, where you cataloged there as well, correct?
Yeah.
And Patrick, then you also moved on to a cataloging position from the University of Illinois at MIT. And so, and how long were you in those positions? I mean, do you want to just talk about that just briefly, or for a bit, or however long you want to talk about it?
Go for it, Daryl.
All right, I'll go first. So I went on, I came to St. Andrews, both for personal reasons. My then girlfriend was still in the UK. And so I was looking for something back in the UK. Later became my wife, so that was an important step. But the job that I came to St. Andrews for was just a 1-year rare book cataloging job. They had some extra money. They really hadn't had a rare book cataloger ever at the university. They just had this succession of rare book librarians who didn't have the kind of support to get any cataloging done. And so they shook loose some money and put out an advert for rare book cataloger. So that was like in March, I think, of my year of doing the library science degree. And so I took a punt and applied for it. And they wanted me to come, but I had to finish my degree. So that's where Don. on, help me. I got to get done with my library science degree so I can start this job. So I finished at Illinois in 9 months, maybe 10 months. I finished my degree, left in June, and started my job in July here in Scotland. And that was a 1-year job. They saw the efficacy of having a rare book cataloger on the cards, as it were, and so they extended my contract for 2 years, and then the post was made permanent after that. So I was a rare book cataloger for a number of years and developed a project not unlike the Quick and Clean cataloging project at Illinois. That's the project that we were talking about with Valerie and with Pat. The rare book librarian went off on maternity leave, and they asked me to step up to rare book librarian, so which in many ways is kind of a teaching curator for the collection. And so that was my progression with St. Andrews. So from a 1-year contract to a 2-year contract to a permanent contract to librarian at St. Andrews.
Okay, all right. And also, it seems like, of course, I don't know, but that first position then that you held, that cataloging position that they then made permanent, and that's really become quite a program, I mean, as you described, but I've seen that there seem to be a lot more people working on it, and maybe even in permanent positions, and it really seems quite significant.
I mean, St. Andrews, like many UK institutions, like most UK institutions, St. Andrews didn't even know how many books it had in its rare book collection when I showed up. I mean, I showed up and they thought they had about 100,000 rare books in their collection, and they knew they had about 50,000 on their online catalog system. They could quantify that. But it wasn't until we had to move the collection because of buildings works that they actually counted every book in the rare book collection. They realized they had about 250,000 books in the collection. So that catalog percentage, like 50% catalog, went down to like 20% cataloged. And they were like, oh, you should probably do something about this. And so that's when my post was made permanent, but then also we developed the what's now called the Lighting the Past project, which is a combination of professional led but student employed cataloging project. And that project ran beyond my time at St. Andrews, and it wrapped up last year. I think they cataloged in total about 75,000 books in the collection.
Oh, wow, okay. And I didn't realize it had wrapped up, but that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's wrapped. There's still a catalog. I mean, there's still a rare book cataloger on the cards, as well as I think a project going on at St. Andrews at the moment. But yeah, Lighting Past ran for a long time and employed a lot of students, and a lot of those students have gone on to be librarians in their own right as well. So I mean, that's the legacy of the Quick and Clean, the Valerie Hotchkiss Quick and Clean project has generated a new generation of librarians across the world. It's pretty remarkable.
That is amazing. That's fantastic. And what about you, Pat? So you went to this MIT.
So I went to, so at the time my then girlfriend had just moved to New York. So I was, looking for a job that was, somewhere in the Northeast. And I should say, I approached this whole, I hesitate to call it a career, because there was I had no plan. I was, I'll take that job, looks good. I need to pay some bills. I'll take this job, or my girlfriend's in New York. I'm gonna look out here. There's no plan for any of this. But so I applied for a job at MIT as a grant-funded position. I was there for 3 years, cataloging a collection of rare books on electricity and magnetism and related fields that MIT had received as a gift. I think it was in 1911, 1912. It was called the Vail Collection. So Theodore Newton Vail, who was an AT&T executive, I believe, bought the collection en bloc from kind of an eccentric British book collector and just shipped it straight to MIT. And there had been some, basic card catalog access to it, but otherwise it had remained pretty well uncatalogued for a century, and so they were able to finally get some funding to have it properly cataloged. So I was there for 3 years. It was my first time living outside the Midwest. Living in Harvard Square, the whole thing kind of just felt like some sort of long vacation.
Wow, that's a lot of fun.
But it was a fantastic time, and it was on that project where I met my now wife, who was the conservation technician on the same grant-funded project. And yeah, now she's off doing far more illustrious things than I am.
Okay. All right, great. And then, of course, then you moved on to the University of Iowa, where you were special collections librarian. And Daryl, you moved on to Modeling College, where you became librarian, correct?
Yep, that's right.
So, so do you guys want to talk a little bit about those moves? What you did there?
Well,
Pat, you go first.
All right.
You go first.
I'll go first this time, Pat.
So as I mentioned, yeah, this was a grant-funded project at MIT, and so when you're on soft money, you're always kind of looking down the road and thinking about that day when the money will stop flowing. And so I'd always, as that date neared, been looking for other opportunities. And so during one of these times, I applied for a job at the University of Iowa, in Iowa City, Iowa. Fantastic book town. Anyone who went to RBMS a few years ago knows. And it was for a special collections librarian. So the position was, functionally, it was mostly curatorial. I did a fair amount of outreach and instruction. But at the time, Iowa had a dedicated outreach and instruction librarian, Colleen Tyson, who was the force behind the very prominent social media presence at the time. So I can take no credit for that. Yeah.
So significant.
My hands were sometimes featured in photos and videos.
But it was just your hands.
Just my hands, just my hands. Colleen did a fantastic job kind of raising awareness, not just of Iowa, but through social media, trying to bring the rare book ecosystem to I think a broader, more popular audience.
Right. Yeah.
I was fortunate just to be there working with her, working for Greg Crickman at the time, who is a fantastic person to work for, and it was just a great group of people. And I really enjoyed my time there. I still think fondly of Iowa City and relish any opportunity to return.
Okay. Oh, and then I should, since we're gonna have, because Daryl was in this position like until very recently, do you want to just talk really quickly about your transitions to Michigan State and how you were special collections librarian and then head of special collections?
So my then fiance, now wife, moved with me to Iowa City. I did propose just before we moved to Iowa City. I was serious. I wanted her to know I was serious. And so she followed me there and wasn't able to find, permanent work there. And so she was also still looking for work. She's a book conservator. And so she applied for a job at Michigan State University. They offered her the job. And she was like, hey, I got this guy. And they were able to come up with something for me, which was special collections librarian. So it was a position that they were looking to hire for about a year down the road anyway. And so I went, interviewed for the job. They hired me. So we both, kind of the dual career couple dream, got jobs at the same institution.
Wow.
And so there, yeah, very, very lucky. Much of my work experience can be attributed to luck and happenstance. And being in a given place at a given time.
We quote you on that, Pat?
Yeah, you can quote me on that, yeah.
Okay.
I may be halfway competent, but there's a lot of luck involved. But so yeah, I was there as special collections librarian. Again, functionally, I was a curator. My primary task was to develop the rare book collection. But I also did a lot of instruction, outreach. I had a quarter-time assignment in cataloging, so I was still cataloging rare books as well. And then for my last year there, I interviewed for and was promoted to the head of special collections. I remained the curator at the same time, and that was, it's a lot to juggle. But I didn't want to let go. I mean, I think it's a lot of people. I love the books. I loved handling the books, having that intimate contact with the books. And so my year as an administrator was eye-opening. I think I knew that I knew it would be a lot of work. It was a lot of work. I knew early on that, I don't think I could do this for 30 more years. It would just burn me out too quickly. And so I have a tremendous amount of respect for like good administrators that I just did not understand before. I mean, Daryl, if any of your employees are watching this, I want them to, if he's advocating for you, providing you with the resources you need, that does not necessarily come easy. And so a good administrator is a very, very valuable thing. But yeah, in the end, so I don't know, I want to before I move on to my next transition, there have been many. We'll let Daryl take a stab at where he's been.
Yeah, hear about your job at Modelin.
Yeah, so in 2016, so I was 6 years into the job at St. Andrews, and I was just kind of looking around and seeing what the next steps might be, and just keeping an eye on the job market. And the librarian position came up at Magdalen College, Oxford, and I thought, well, if there's any book town in the UK, Oxford is the best place. I mean, just the kind of capacity of bookish people in Oxford, but then also all of the libraries and a significant number of kind of booksellers within the radius of Oxford as well. It just, it is a magical place. So I took the job in September of 2016, first as librarian and then as fellow librarian for the college. And it was a good 3 years. I mean, it was running the main library, so the college library, which is, kind of a modern circulating library. And then in charge of the old library, the college archives and the college muniments. So it was a pretty wide remit, but I mean, it's kind of standard tale of Oxford and Cambridge college libraries is you have like 2 people to run everything. And so it's kind of constantly spinning plates and walking around and trying to keep things going. Model was pretty good. We had larger staff than most colleges, but historic collections to kind of match the age and prowess of the college, I guess. Yeah, so I worked there for 3 years. It was a really interesting 3 years, both in terms of the profession, just I was able to push forward a big exhibitions and outreach program. I was able to get involved in schools outreach as well. We did a lot of local and kind of near local schools outreach. A lot of career development for the staff that I had as well, to kind of get involved in in that side of things too. But we kind of found, just personally for our life circumstances, that Oxford was great, but it wasn't quite what we were looking for, and that the east coast of Scotland, where we were, really offered a quality of life. So although things were going fantastic in Oxford, and I thought, my next career move, I'd like to go back to Scotland if I could. I thought that would be 8 or 10 years down the road, because knowing the Scottish library network, special collection network, there's not that many of you, and in order for a position to open up, somebody usually has to retire or die, and nobody was anywhere close to retiring or dying, I think. So I was like, next move, 10 years down the line, whatever, I'll look at Scotland. And then Joe Marshall, who was head of special collections at Edinburgh, took a newly created post at the National Library of Scotland, and then all of a sudden this kind of head of special collections post was advertised for the University of Edinburgh. So although kind of 3 years in time in Oxford was cut a bit short because a new opportunity arose. But it was, Oxford is a fun and strange place. There's so much happening in Oxford, just in terms of, there's a bibliographical society, there's all kind of lectures, there is, every library has its own thing that's going on. We were one of a handful of college libraries that had an exhibitions and kind of programming schedule around exhibitions as well. So there's just like, every day of the week you could attend a different bookish thing, throughout term time in Oxford. And that was great, but it was also a bit exhausting. And Oxford itself, it takes as much as you put into it out of you. And I found after a while that the Oxford was pretty exhausting. So we decided to change.
If I may,
well, the programming that you shared was extraordinary. that we saw on Twitter and so forth. I'm sorry, Pat, what were you about to say?
I noticed Daryl left Oxford. I don't think it was too long after a dramatized version of your position was murdered in an episode of Endeavor. Is that
in my library? That was in my library, man.
What?
Yeah.
Did that have anything to do with your decision to move?
Yeah, I mean, the writing was on the wall. If they're gonna let a librarian get murdered in Endeavor in my library.
Wow. Wait, specifically at Modeling College?
Yeah, so modeling, I mean, a lot of the Oxford colleges make their money throughout the summertime by being film locations or summer schools. I mean, you can make your money off of kids from America coming to do summer schools in Oxford, or by television producers filming murder scenes in your library. So yeah, Endeavor, which was in its 4th season by then, I think 3rd or 4th season anyways. They needed a scene for murder in the Bodleian Library, and they couldn't afford the Bodleian Library, but they could afford Malplin. So.
Oh, I see. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, and for those of you who are watching, Daryl and I were just discussing how parts of his dark materials on HBO were filmed at various Oxford colleges, including Magdalen. So.
Including Magdalen, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Season 2 there'll be some Magdalen.
Yes. Which has not been released yet, so this is very exciting.
No library cameos, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all that, both of you, and of course that brings us to where you are now. So, Pat, you moved on to New England, and specifically to just outside of Boston, and you have set up shop as a antiquarian book dealer. And Daryl, you are now the head of special collections at the University of Edinburgh, and you went through quite an interesting move very recently during COVID and during a shutdown in England. So why don't you guys talk about your current situations? So I'll let you guys talk about that.
You want to continue your story, Daryl?
All right.
Yes.
All right,
Excellent.
Let's see. So I started as head of special collections at the University of Edinburgh in March, the 2nd of March, which hindsight was a ridiculous time to be starting a job. Essentially, I came up to Edinburgh for a couple of weeks. The family wasn't due to locate until April. So I came up to Edinburgh for a couple of weeks and then was going to yo-yo back and forth a little bit. After 10 days of working up in Edinburgh and I had gone back down to Oxford, the whole university shut down, the whole world was shutting down. So up until like a week ago, I've had I haven't set a foot in Edinburgh. So I've spent the last, whatever it is, 4.5 months now in this new position, working with my wonderful colleagues, but completely in, this kind of fashion, and therefore having exposure to the collections that's completely mitigated by the digital collections that the university has put up. So it's been an interesting experience. I mean, the first 10 days I was there was mostly, getting to know you meetings and hi, hello, my name is kind of stuff. And I had like a grand total of an hour, maybe an hour and a half with collections. And it was really just kind of, these are the top 10 items that you need to know when you're talking to potential donors and that kind of stuff. And no chance to really just kind of wander the stacks. But, these first couple of months, instead of, being bombarded by all kinds of meetings and things, being able to do focus meetings with people in a virtual environment means I've gotten to know my staff a lot better. I've got but also lots of projects have moved forward. And it's been really exciting to kind of plan what the next step is going to be. So in many ways, I'm getting this clean slate that I would not have had the pandemic not happened in a way.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Well, as for me, so Daryl, you're done. I don't want to cut in and.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. I was at Michigan State University, my wife and I both, and it was clear that my wife would not be able to advance there, and so she was looking for new opportunities. And what was basically her dream job opened up in Andover, out here north of Boston. So she interviewed for and was offered that job, and so we moved back to New England. And at that point, again, we've been doing this dual career thing for a while, and really it sometimes seems like there could be no firm end to it. If we could move back here and then I could be offered something else somewhere else, and then is it my turn? But I knew that this was a fantastic job for her, something she really wanted, and so I had started out in the trade and had really enjoyed it, and thought, well, maybe I can just go into business for myself as a bookseller, and really kind of put an end to the whole dual career conundrum of who follows whom where. This way I'm really pretty mobile. I can move the business wherever I might need to, and so I went for it. It's one of the most exciting and terrifying things I've ever done. And I've been doing it now for about over a year and a half. And I focus on hand pressed material, so early printed books, roughly pre-1830-ish. Mostly European. I do a bit of British and American stuff. But yeah, that's what I've been working out of my house. It really is kind of the ideal pandemic working situation, working alone out of the house, surrounded by my books. So I can't complain on that front. And yeah, unfortunately, it looks like I'll be able to make some kind of living doing this. So, that was the question. Well, if this doesn't work out, what next? And so you never. I felt very fortunate to keep myself in this whole rare materials ecosystem as long as I have, because I've really tried to never take it for granted, because I know, especially when you're in kind of a dual career couple, I mean, it could, your life can be upended at any point. But I think this will be a way for me to kind of stick with it, regardless of what, and my wife is also very happy at work. So I think we've moved a lot, and I think maybe we're done moving for a while.
That's good. And maybe all three of us are done moving for a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment too. I think I'm good.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Daryl, Pat was talking about sort of this dual situation where he was both a curator and an administrator, and you had mentioned that when you were at Oxford, you described sort of the setup at the Oxford colleges, that there might be like a couple of main people and then sort of a staff, and that you were lucky to have a bigger staff. And it really seemed like there were a lot of things that you were able to continue to do sort of, as a curator, because you were putting together these exhibitions and all these other things, and you were really busy, and it was a lot of work and whatever. So in some ways, it almost seems like your position may have reflected a lot of what Pat was doing at Michigan State.
Yeah, I mean, the Oxford situation, it was particular to Magdalen, I think, just because I had a couple of extra staff around.
Right.
The Magdalen job was really a kind of 50% administrative job and 50% curatorial job in many ways. It was kind of, make sure that, that manage the staff in both the main library and the archive, and make sure that things are happening there the way that they should. And then the other half of your time, your duties are curatorially with the historical collections. And so that was both working with the historical collections at Magdalen, but then also I had a bit of research time myself, and so I was able to push forward a big Oxford initiative with Thinking 3D, which had a big exhibition at the Bodleian, and then a lot of other exhibitions across Oxford and London, and actually Nashville too. Going back to Valerie asked me to come across to Vanderbilt and help open up an exhibition that they had launched that was tied into the initiative too.
Oh, that's great.
Back in the circle. But I think a lot of that was because I was at Magdalen, and Magdalen was fortunate enough to have a couple members of staff who ran the main library, which is the most important thing for the students, right? Is to make sure that the student library was running well. We had a full-time archivist, which for an Oxford college is still a pretty rare thing, which is just insane. If you think about the archives that most Oxford and Cambridge colleges have, most of them are run on like a 50% contract archivist. Magdalen, we had one in the third actually. So, you know, I had enough time and headspace to really kind of push forward some initiatives within the college and out with the college as well. And that was great. That kind of gave me a taste for administration, which is, you know, one of the reasons I decided to take the move to Edinburgh, because I really liked the, you know, getting, I mean, the kind of beauty of working with the books, like what Pat said, and spending time with the books is, as a curator, is also putting the right book in front of the right person, right? And seeing that connection between book and person. And for me, I love that, and I still love that, but I also love seeing, it sounds kind of voyeuristic, but like seeing, you know, putting the right curator in the right room with the right people, seeing, you know, what kind of magic, you know what the collections are. And if you've got a really good curator and you throw that into a space with, you know, whatever audience, I love seeing that, you know, seeing that happen as well. So that gave me a taste, a model, and gave me a taste of that. But the one thing, I mean, this comes back into Pat's world too, is that at Magdalen, you know, it was the historic collections, but those collections weren't developed that much. There wasn't, you know, an acquisitions budget for historical collections. I went out and did some things, but it was all off of soft money. Where at Edinburgh, the kind of growth of the collection still falls to the head of special collections. And so there's a kind of, that's my one curatorial enjoyment at Edinburgh, is growing and building the collections with a healthy acquisitions budget. So I'm back in the game, as it were.
That's great. Yeah, so it's sort of the best of many worlds for you, being back where you want to be living and where it's good for your family, and
with you know, with a collection that's amazing, and with a staff that's fantastic too. So. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so so I think that that we pretty much covered everything that I have in my interviewing question list. Do you guys have any, you know, final remarks, things you want to say about sort of the future, you know, anything that you see about like the future of rare books, special collections, maybe even librarianship, like, you know, in this dire time of COVID, you know, do you have anything that you want to say about anything philosophical like that?
It's a heavy request. Daryl?
It is heavy, yes.
There's a lawnmower coming, so maybe not. No, I mean, I think for me, what has become more apparent in the last couple of years is that, I mean, as much as our world is about the things that we work with, the rare materials that we work with, it's also about the people in the community. And I think what I love the most about my job, our jobs, our profession, is that kind of community, which has, I mean, at the heart of it, two really important things is, one is this kind of need for learning. Like our jobs constantly challenge us to kind of learn new things, whether it's about collections or about things under care. Sorry, there's a lawnmower coming.
I can hear you fine.
Yeah. Okay. And the other side of it is working together, right? Collaboration, whether that's, you know, working with your colleagues in your institution or working with folks out with or outside of your sector. Oh man.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
Your lawn's gonna look great.
It's gonna look awesome.
And it's exciting to hear about a lawnmower, or to hear a lawnmower at all, because like I'm surrounded by
Anyways, I'll back up a little bit. So the other side of things is collaboration, is being able to kind of work together. And, you know, the fact that we've got the collections is our nexus point, right? You know, whether you're curating a collection or building a collection or selling material or helping build collections, you know, whatever it is, but we're working together, right? And, you know, the fact that that has changed. I think, you know, in our generation's lifetime, we've kind of moved from, you know, one or two generations back of rare book librarianship being a very kind of, you know, my islands kind of mentality. You know, this is my collection and that's it. And same thing with booksellers as well, as that's changed a lot in the last 20, 25 years probably. And it's been great to be part of that.
That's great. you have anything to say, Pat?
I've got nothing, deep and wise to add here. Only to say, like Daryl, one of my favorite things as a librarian was always to connect students, faculty with books that really move them. That was always, and if I could do that with something in the collection, or better yet, something that I had recently bought for the collection, I mean, that was the greatest satisfaction in the world. And so now I guess I enjoy being able to kind of do that on a wider scale, to connect books with the librarians, the curators, who will then do that further level of connecting. And really, I just feel very fortunate to continue to be able to work with the special collections folks I've been working with for many years now. It's a privilege, it's an honor, and I'll keep doing it as long as I can.
Yeah. But yeah, you both have been doing this for a really long time. So these are
I think it feels longer than what it actually was.
No, it is. It's a long time. It's a lot. There's a lot of newcomers to the field, which is exciting. But at this point, I mean, this is longevity we're talking about here. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if we're talking about futures, and especially for new generations of rare book and special collections people, is like, I think that the biggest thing and the lesson that I've learned is look at the people that are around you now, right? Look at your fellow students, look at the people that you're working with in your first job or your first two jobs, because you're going to see those people the rest of your life, whether or not you're working with them or not. That's the thing. I mean, with Pat, we were saying before we started the interview, I think the last time I saw Pat was RBMS Miami, which was 2016, right?
Yeah. Or 2017, one or the other. Yeah.
It was just before I started modeling, I think. So I think it was 2016. And I saw Pat there, and it's like, wow, Pat, I haven't seen you since I left Illinois, and we caught back up, and like in this conversation, it's just like falling back into this old conversation. And our careers have kind of done these concentric circles, and it's been so for new professionals, look around you, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with people, whether you like them or not.
Yes. No, that's a very good point. That is an excellent point. Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so deeply honored and so thrilled that you both shared all of this with me, with the audience who choose to watch this video, and I'm really glad that you guys are where you are now and settled in these great places, and it's all very exciting. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Pat.
See you again.